and welcome to not an episode of the Lonely Knitter podcast, but instead a video where I have a little chat about knit blanket patterns. So I have been thinking about this for a while and I have a little list to share with you. So if you've not been over to my channel before, hi, I'm Laura. I am your host. I'm coming to you from Folk Yarn Studio, which is where I dye the Lonely Knitter yarn, where I produce or get in and send out folk yarn, which is an East Anglian yarn, and organise East Anglia Yarn Festival. I am coming to you from Lowestoft, which is the most easterly town in England, and yeah, today I've come for a chat about knit blanket patterns. One of my goals for 2025 will be to knit on a blanket. I'm going to start a new blanket at the beginning of the year and I'm going to work on it throughout the year. Whether or not I have it finished by the end of the year is a whole other story. It's more just the idea that I will work on it throughout the year. At the end of the year, I'll take stock, see where I am. If I'm at a finishing place, amazing. But it's more about the process. It's about carrying something through the year and not giving up, forgetting about it, popping it into a project bag and not finishing it. Before I get started, I am wearing a hand knit sweater. This is not a hand knit sweater that I knit myself. This was knit by my lovely friend Nina. I love it, I treasure it. It is the Dancing Nancies pattern. I will put the details below. It isn't meant to fit like this. I have had some significant body changes over the last year and this is, not the fit that is intended. However, I am still absolutely treasuring it. I'm wearing it in the studio all the time, especially when it is chilly. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this pattern on looks, but I didn't knit it myself, but it's gorgeous. Anyway, onto my list. Now, I will just say, first of all, this is not an exhaustive list for me. I'm a little bit obsessed with sort of collecting blanket patterns. I will also say my mug is from the lovely Emily Cross Ceramics. I love Emily's mugs. They always make me think of cauldrons and witchy, or at least this one does. And I also need to say that I'm so sorry about my hands and my nails because I know they are disgusting, but it has been a dye day and I also had a bit of an incident with some Tipp-Ex. It's all kind of gone wrong for my poor hands today. Anyway, back to the blankets. So I have 10 patterns to share with you. There was a lot more than 10 patterns on this list. I also have a link below. Now I know not everyone can use Ravelry. However, that is where this bundle is. This is where I stored all of these. This is where I bundled them together. So there is a link below for those that can use Ravelry to a blanket bundle. Now that blanket bundle does include these 10 patterns, but I will also write the names and designers of the patterns below the video so that you can see those without having to go over to Ravelry. But the link to the bundle will go there, and it doesn't just have those 10 patterns. It also has all of the other patterns that I have spotted or thought about or made over the years or had on the list, but I whittled it down to 10, which was hard. Those are all in there too. So if you would like to see those, they are below. Yeah, just in case. So in terms of order, now these are not ranked in order of when I'm going to make them or if they're my favourite or anything like that, because I haven't actually made all of these patterns and I haven't 100% decided which pattern I'm making next year, even though I am probably about 95%, and one of those is on the list and I will point it out as we go along. So I will get straight into the list. I'll give you the title of the pattern. I will put in a little picture of the pattern. If the patterns are free, I will say. If they are a paid for pattern, I will give you the price. And I have not been asked to share any of these at all, but any that are paid for patterns, I have purchased a copy of myself. And that's about it. So I'm going to kick it off with a blanket that I have knit before, and I have also started about probably 15 times and then left by the wayside because I am chaos. That is the Coziest Memory blanket by Kemper Wray. Now, when I give you the names of the designers, some of them I'll say their names, some of them I will say their online title. It's whatever was listed with the pattern on Ravelry. So this is the Coziest Memory by Kemper Wray, and I'll pop a little picture in. So this is a free pattern. It comes in both English and French, and it is for your scraps. I have made a lot of these in part and then given up. So the first one I made, oh my gosh, it was absolutely years ago. I can't even remember how long ago it was. It was before I had children, and it was started with literally any little scraps. So there was a lot of commercial yarn in there. There was yarn with nylon, yarn with no nylon, a lot of commercial yarn. Then as I moved into hand-dyed yarn, as I discovered hand-dyed yarn back at a time when I definitely did not have the budget to get a lot of hand-dyed yarn, that is when it started to grow. Like, you could really see as it grew the changes in terms of what was in there. That blanket, I have no idea where it is. Might see if I can find it later. It was left unfinished with all the ends hanging out for absolutely ages, and I have a feeling that one of my children, probably my daughter when she was a toddler, she's nearly 8, but I have a feeling that she kind of adopted it and carried it everywhere for a little while. It was definitely well loved. It was also not finished. Now, when I say it was not finished, what I mean is it was about 3/4 of the way done, and it had like a big zigzaggy edge where there was more squares to be added, and I just gave up on it and went and started something else. But I still called it done because it was so big that it was good enough to be a blanket for me. So it was done, even though it really wasn't done. But stick-to-itiveness, is that a word? Stick-to-itiveness on big blankets that have lots of little sections is something that I definitely struggle with. It came back into my life when I first started watching the SCL1TNO podcast, which is Sharon, which she renamed, or it was about her knitting project that she would, her knitting project style that she would use, and she renamed as the Knitting Project. And she used to, I don't know if she still does because I am way behind on podcasts, but she used to knit a square every single day, and that always made me want to get back into them. I fail miserably. A lot, it seems. And then I have started ones with less stitches, ones with more stitches, in an attempt to make bigger squares, or in terms of the little squares, just to finish them quicker. But then obviously it takes more squares to make a blanket. So in the original pattern, it is about 5 to 6 grams of leftover sock yarn on a 2.75mm needle should make a square that measures approximately 3.5 inches on each side. You build up your squares, mitered square. It's a basic mitered square pattern. There are tons of them on the internet, but this one is the one that I've used. This is the one that seems to be well known over the internets. Yeah. So number 1, Coziest Memory. Number 2 is the one that is hitting my probably 95% sure going to be my blanket that I'm going to knit with my DK. I'm going to keep the DK option of my mini skein club for next year. So I'm running a mini skein club where you get 3 DK minis each month, and I am hoping to put them into a sweet shop blanket. So the sweet shop blanket is a pattern by Laura Penrose. It's DK, and let me get my notes. So it costs £6. It's in English. It's a 4mm needle, and it's DK or fingering weight held double. Now, she does provide sizes in terms of how many squares to make a baby or pet blanket, a lap square, a lap rectangle, or a throw. I have no idea what size I might end up with because I'm not sure if I'm going to pull in a contrast colour for half of each square. I have no idea. I haven't made a plan. This is why I'm not totally committed to this plan yet as well, because it's a very loose plan. But it's 20 grams of DK weight yarn for a full square, or 10 grams per triangle. So the way that pattern works, and there will have been a picture already, but the way that pattern works is that you knit half of the square and then the other half if you want to change the colour, and it'll be triangles. So number 3 is the Habitation throw by Helen Stewart. Now this is a pattern that I have made myself, and I have also part made and abandoned many times as well, but it is the epitome of garter stitch squish in a pattern. You do need a long cable because your rows will get long because all of your stitches are on there, and you are basically making your blanket on one needle, not in lots of little pieces. There's eyelet detail in there for a little bit of interest, but it is a paid for pattern. It is £6. It's written in English and it is on a 4mm needle. 4mm needle with fingering weight yarn. It's a pretty loose gauge and it is super squishy. I love that about this pattern. Also, I think so Helen has video tutorials for her techniques, and it was originally designed to go with an advent, and I think, or not to go with an advent, but to knit with any advent. I think I originally got it through her knit vent, where you get a pattern, you get regular patterns through advent, and I think that's when I originally got it, because this one's already in my library. So yeah, that's the Habitation throw by Helen Stewart. Next up at number 4, I have the Northeasterly by Skeinanigans. Now, a few years ago, this was a huge advent hit. It came out right at the end of the November, and then everybody knit this pattern throughout December. It was huge, and it's still a huge favourite now, it seems. I love this pattern. I have a half-made one of these blankets because, like most things, I have a half-made thing. And yeah, it was easy to follow. It was join as you go. It's a paid for pattern. It's $5 US, which at the moment is apparently £4.11, but it has been translated as well into lots of other languages. So the Northeasterly is available in English, Danish, French, German, Portuguese, Spanish and Swedish, which I thought was really cool. There's also instructions to have it for both fingering and DK weight. So if you have fingering weight, then you'll be making it with a 2.75mm needle. If you have a DK weight, you'll be making it with a 3.75mm needle. And you make columns, and each column is about 3 inches in width. And yeah, it's a join as you go method, no seaming. That always gets my vote because I'm awful at coming back and finishing stuff off. Always have been. Okay, in at number 5, I've got the Jelly Roll Blanket by Kay Jones. Yeah, so Kay is one of the hosts of the Bakery Bears podcast, and this just looks like the most squishy, lovely, chill blanket. The blanket is £4.75, so it's a paid for pattern. It's available in English and it's knit on a 2.75mm needle. It is a fingering weight pattern, but there are now notes on it to say that it has been updated to also include DK details. So yeah, both DK and fingering weight. Actually, you also add like an I-cord border afterwards, which I think might be something that would not ever get finished if it was me. Though the I-cord makers with the 3 little hooks, I feel like if I could do it with that, maybe I would do it. In at number 6, I have the Stella Quilt Blanket. That is another pattern by Laura Penrose. I love this. I love this picture. I love the look of this pattern. I haven't made it yet. I had the quilt cushion. When that came out, I bought the pattern for the quilt cushion. Then the pattern for the quilt blanket came out. And then there was an expansion pack that came out as well. Now, if you own the first 2 patterns, you can have the expansion pack for free. So from this pattern, I bought the cushion cover when that came out, the pattern for the cushion cover when that came out. Then when the blanket pattern came out, I bought that as well. When I was looking at it for this video, I realised that I had never gone and purchased the expansion pack. So there's also the expansion pack, which includes the details for quilt blocks for a star, a chevron, a triangle and a pinwheel. Now, when I went to purchase that on top of the other 2, there was a note in the description, but I'd missed it at that point. But when I put it in my basket on Ravelry, it let me know that because I had already purchased the cushion cover and the blanket patterns, the expansion pack was free. So yeah, I had that for free, which was nice. So yeah, it is a paid for pattern. It's got instructions for DK. You can also obviously use fingering weight held double. It's knit on a 4mm needle. I really want to make this pattern, but I'm not sure it will be the best option for my club for next year. And I think it's one that I need to keep in my back pocket for when I have more time. Up at number 7, I have the Beekeepers quilt, which is a pattern by Tiny Owl Knits. Now, this is a paid for pattern. It's $5.50, which at the moment is meant to be £4.53. It's a 3.5mm needle. It's written in English, and it's fingering weight. Now this is well known as the Hexi-Puff pattern. So the little hexagons that you create are little stuffed individual Hexi-Puffs. So puffed up little hexagons. They are so cute. They're absolutely adorable. Yeah, you make tons of the little Hexi-Puffs and you join them a little differently. So the pattern description actually says, joining in the corners with simple quilt ties for floppability, which, first of all, who doesn't love the word floppability? Because that's amazing. But it does mean that on the back of your work you have all the little ties, all the little strands of yarn where you've tied the pieces together. Now, and again, it does say this in the description, but if one gets damaged or stains, it's easy to lift one out and replace it. So yeah, if you're hard wearing on your blankets or if you drop something on them, you can just swap out your Hexi-Puff for another Hexi-Puff if one got ripped or anything like that. But I think if I was picking it up and getting underneath it, those little ties would annoy me. In fact, they did annoy me when I was making it, and I tried at one point to stitch them together and it was just not happening. So yeah, it's quite a bulky blanket because there's obviously stuffing inside each one. I have made one of these in part. So I made a piece. I can't remember how big it was, probably around that-ish big. And then I had lots of other little hexies living around my house for quite a while. It was very clear to me after a good chunk of making on this pattern that I was never going to finish it. Not because it isn't brilliant, just because I am distractible. It's lots of individual little pieces. I was losing them all over the place and getting distracted, and yeah, it didn't happen, sadly. But it is not all tragedy, because all of the hexies that I had made and the little piece that I'd already put together, I sent off to a lovely friend who was also making a Hexi-Puff blanket. So it did get used, did not get wasted. It's all good. In at number 8, I have the Pinwheel scrap blanket, which is a pattern by Knitting Expat Designs. This is a paid for pattern. It's £4.50. It's written in English and it uses a 2.75mm or 3mm needle. It specifically says like whichever you like for the gauge, the squish that you like. And it uses 4 to 5 grams for each triangle of your pinwheel. There is an option for crochet seaming as well, which I like. I love a crochet seaming option rather than having to do stitching that will most likely look wonky because I'm not paying attention. I'm trying to watch the TV at the same time. But one of the real good points about this pattern that is written by the designer in the description is that it's really good for traveling. So if you like to take a scrappy project, a scrappy blanket around with you and you're traveling, being able to take the pinwheel scrap blanket, you're able to use up multiple scraps in one pinwheel and have your, if you're doing a section a day, you can do that for multiple days, but you're still just working on one square at a time, and you can store the larger project at home and not have to carry a massive blanket all around with you. I also think this is one of those patterns that is a really fun option for a quilt style blanket, but uses up your scraps, your little bits and bobs, which, I mean, I know I have tons of little scraps and bits and bobs left over that, to me, they're treasure. And having a blanket like that is absolute treasure, but it's a little bit different from the mitered square. Number 9 is the Triangulum blanket by Ellie Jones. That's Ellie of Craft House Magic. Now, the Triangulum blanket isn't just the blanket, it's the Triangulum blanket and cowl pattern. It's a paid for pattern, but you get both the details to make the blanket and the cowl in the pattern. It's £4.25. It's written in English, and you can choose between fingering and DK weight. I love a scrappy little project where you can pick between fingering and DK. So with the fingering weight, you would use a 2.75mm needle, and it says that you would use about 3 grams per triangle of your sections. You'll be able to see what I mean by little sections. I think they're so cute. With the DK version, you'd use a 3.5mm needle, and it's 4 grams per triangle. So again, brilliant for little scrappy bits and bobs and making treasure out of your little leftovers. On this blanket, each triangle should measure about 3 3/4 inches per side, and it does have details for an I-cord bind off. Now, whether or not I would put an I-cord all the way around the outside, because again, finishing stuff off is not where I live. But it looks amazing in the pictures. And one other thing to note is that in the description, it does state that there are video tutorials for the finishing techniques. I love a video tutorial, especially for finishing techniques. I think it's brilliant. Love it. And my last pattern, number 10, is the Polygon pattern by Tin Can Knits. Now, I think I have started one of these once before. It was a while back. But I've had this pattern in my library for quite a while. It is a paid for pattern. It's $6, which at the moment is meant to be £4.94. It's written in English. It is made on a 4mm needle and it is a DK weight blanket. So each hexie, and I know it says hexie, and when you look at the pattern, hexie, but can we just take a moment to appreciate that this is a picture of a load of starfish. In my mind, I can't see hexie, even when they're blocked out and in their blanket. I just go, it's a starfish. So yeah, what I affectionately nickname the little starfish pattern. So there is a 1-inch border applied to the outside, but each individual hexie is 5.5 inches across. And the details say that it's 20 yards, which is about like 18.5 meters. That is not from inside my brain. I googled it and forgot to write it down, and now I'm totally off on my own little brain journey that may be totally wrong. I think that 20 yards is around 18.5 meters. So 20 yards for a full hexie of DK weight yarn, which means that you'd be able to get, if my maths is right, you'd be able to get 2 of the little starfish from 1 DK mini. So if you were making that with an advent, you'd get 48. If you were going to make some scrappy ones where you used up your tiny little bits and bobs, you'd get a few more, but 48 little starfish from an advent, oh, that's pretty good. I feel like that's something that I would do at some point. Or it does say that you can use 10 yards per half hexie and do half of one colour and half of another. I think I'd probably do whole hexies. I like the picture where it shows the whole hexies. I like the idea of making that one. Definitely, it's on my list. So yeah, that's Tin Can Knits. I have used the Tin Can Knits app for when I'm working their patterns before, and actually I found it really useful, really easy to use, and really simple to follow my pattern through, keep notes on where I am, and not have to print it out and lose the piece of paper, which happens to me a lot. So, as I said at the beginning, there are a lot more than 10 patterns that I would like to make in terms of knit blankets, but I see a lot of crochet blankets. I make quite a lot of crochet blankets because for me they've always been faster. Even though I am more of a knitter than a crocheter, they've worked up faster, so I get more instant gratification. So I thought it'd be nice to do a little bit of a video around the knit blanket patterns that I really want to make. As I said before, there is the bundle below for Ravelry. If you can use Ravelry, you can head over to there. You can see all of these patterns, but also all of the other ones that I popped into the bundle that didn't make this video only because I could only choose 10. Yeah, I think there's some real gems. I think there's some real gems in there. I want more knit blankets in my house. My children usually steal them because they love them. Squishy. Who doesn't love a squishy blanket, especially in winter? And I figure as it is coming up to the end of December, well, we're in middle of December, but it's coming towards the end of December and we're going to be at the beginning of a new year. If I want to make a goal of making a blanket and putting work into it throughout each month, why not have that as a beginning of the year, get started and do it sort of idea. Yeah. If you have gotten all the way to the end of this very long ramble, well done you. And if you fancy giving me a thumbs up or subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, it all helps my channel get seen and I would appreciate it. If you would like to leave a comment below, that also helps me out, and I would love to know if there are any knit blanket patterns that you feel should be on this list, should definitely have been in the top 10 of my list, or should be added to the Ravelry bundle. Let me know about those too, and I will add them in because I am always on the hunt for more patterns. I'm going to leave it there because I'm sure you've had enough of my waffle. But if you have got all the way to the end, thank you, as always, for making me so much less of a lonely knitter.